And we are streaming. Hello everybody and welcome to MMOFTW Live with MMORPG.com, and a special presentation for you today with the man, the myth, the legend, Garrett Fuller. I'm kidding. Richard Garriott, everybody, up at the top.
Richard holds that crown, man. I can't say that.
So,
you're too kind.
so this, obviously I'm Bill Murphy, the managing editor, and right below me is Garrett Fuller, our industry relations manager. And
hey,
then
everybody.
down at the very bottom, shiny as always, is Robert Graculin Lashley. Hey, Rob.
How's it going?
All right, so we missed last week.
Cold down here.
It is cold. It's very cold. We missed last week because there were lots of stuff going on, and we had a whole bunch of things going on. So we have a very special episode this week for you, where we're just going to talk to Mr. Richard, Mr. Lord British himself, about Shroud of the Avatar and everything that's going on with the Kickstarter, and get some more details. But before we get into the interview portion, I'm going to go ahead and let Robert down there tell us about. I guess sort of like recap what he talked about with Richard back on Tuesday as briefly as you can. If you can recap a whole hour, go for it.
Okay, in a nutshell, we talked about what is a Lord British game, what the differences between this and Ultima would be, and how they'd be similar. We talked about how if you get one fruit seed, that's not pay to win, so just go hang out with the rest of the people on the lunatic fringe. Talked about the dual maps, how you're going to have the overworld adventure map, and then you'll actually have the more close-up. There's two maps. Watch the video that's looping, you'll eventually see what I'm talking about. And we talked about a lot of other good stuff. We talked about the different tiers, the reward levels. We talked about housing. We talked about the new crafting that they just talked about that day. We talked about that you might actually get to have a houseboat, and hopefully we'll hear a little bit more about that.
Not a filthy
one.
There's a nice
5
one.
adventures. What's that?
Not a filthy houseboat, a nice houseboat.
Okay.
Of course.
You won't make bridges between the continents with.
No.
That there's currently 5 episodes in development. Or I shouldn't necessarily say development, but they're story arced out.
Planned.
And planned. And I guess that's the big points that we got to.
Yeah, you can watch the full thing. It's on YouTube. It was about an hour long, and it's on MMORPG.com as well. But now we're going to go even deeper into some more of the mechanics and stuff about the game. But first, before we get to that, we're down to the home stretch, Richard. The Kickstarter is done in just a couple days now, right? So
that's right. A little less than 3 days.
A little less than 3 days. How's it going? What's the atmosphere like? I mean, how's the target coming along? I mean, you've already passed the main goal, but how's the stretch goals and all that stuff coming?
Yeah, doing great. If you've watched Kickstarters, the classic pattern is that they start strong, which we did. Then there's a lull in the middle, which we've been going through, and then just as you begin to close the door and people realize that if they don't get in now, then they're going to miss out on all the special add-ins that we do to try to encourage people to come in at the Kickstarter time. Those are going to go away, and so there's always a ramp up at the very end, and we're in that end ramp up now. So we're very pleased with it already. We were pleased when we crossed that first million. We've been extra pleased though these last couple of days as we've been seeing the pickup rate that'll push us over a few more of these stretch goals. So we've just hit our $1.4 million stretch goal. If you put our Kickstarter together with a separate Shroud of the Avatar site we put together for foreign people who can't use Amazon payments.
You're about $1,000 away from hitting it just on the Kickstarter now, too.
Very close, yeah.
Great. Which means that means we're actually in a good way to making the next target. So because the Shroud of the Avatar site I think has 30 or 40,000 in it as well. So that means we're
45 right now.
Whew.
Perfect. So yeah, so we're already halfway almost to that next goal. So that's very exciting. And because at least for me, I'm particularly excited about that 1.5 million goal because we get back to using Dennis Lubé for the cover art. He's the guy that did all the Ultima cover art except Ultima 2. And we're going to get David Watson, also known to most players as YOLO,
nice,
to design us a piece of music for the new game as well. So and anyway, I'm hoping we get to that 1.5.
Very close, though. Very close. Here's a question. Who are the people that have pledged $10,000? Can you give us names? I'm kidding. Just
well,
curious.
What's interesting is what I thought was interesting is that I didn't realize that during the Kickstarter we'd be able to watch exactly who is at every one of these levels, and so we've also been greatly curious about those $10,000 levels as to, is this going to be like friends and family that we know, or is it going to be really strangers from the great out wilds that none of us know?
Random benefactors.
And I have none of my relatives are in there. I do have one good friend who I won't call out, but I have one good friend who's in there at that highest level.
Garrett.
But everyone else is someone who's new to our community, and so I'm really looking forward to one of the things we're giving people when they come in at that level is personalized tours of Britannia Manor and all that kind of stuff. So I'm looking forward to getting to know these people better.
What happens if they pledge $10,000 just to try to assassinate you in the game?
Well, as long as it's just in the game, that's all right.
That's okay. Never mind. I'm not inviting them to the manor.
I don't know
Forget
if you guys
about
know.
it.
I've actually had an invader that I had to repel with gunfire in my actual home Britannia Manor. So
I did not know that.
I've had that a little bit too close call on that front already once before. So hopefully none of them are quite that crazy.
I would think if they have that kind of money, they better not be that crazy.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, that's true.
It is really funny though. I've been since you mentioned that, I do have I have my funny fan mail collection here next to me, and I have people who send me in crazy things like. This is a guy that sent me this stuff about how to put these monster images together. It's supposed to be like a puzzle, but no two pieces go together, and no two pieces are like either heads or arms or anything else. It's just all like guts and guts and some more guts. So I do have plenty of crazy people around.
Well, it's okay.
So it's like a Rorschach test for monsters together.
I'm very interested.
It's strange.
Did he draw? Are they hand drawn or are those like photocopied?
Well, they were originally hand-drawn, and then he photocopied, and some of them are scaled up and some of them are scaled down, and he cut the guts apart at different places.
Wow.
It doesn't make any sense.
Wow.
But it's supposedly monster puzzle pieces. Whatever.
It was creative in theory.
It is.
That's the way you look at it.
It probably is deeply creative. We just can't grasp it.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a bit about the game itself here. Let's talk about character advancement. Can you give us sort of an overview of, in your mind, how it's going to work, from the ground up, like first steps into the game, all the way through the single player and into the sort of online MMO component?
Exactly. So first, people might recognize as familiar in my other works, it's important to me from a story standpoint that this is you, the real person from Earth, who has found their way to the new world, and even if you undergo some physical transformation so that you are more appropriate to fight these monsters, it's still you inside of your avatar. And in fact, even the use of the term avatar for your in-game manifestation really goes back to Ultima 4, and the reason I chose that word is because it meant the incarnation of a god on Earth, and I used it therefore for you in the new world. And because when I'm telling a story where I'm going to judge you based on your honesty and compassion and valor, I need to make sure you're playing yourself. You're not playing Conan the Barbarian. So that's a foundational piece. And then something that follows onto that is that therefore I don't want you to have to start your character over. So I don't want you to have a fighter that you use sometimes and a wizard you use some other times, because it's supposed to be you.
Yeah.
And so I want you to be able to explore the entire skill tree without feeling the obligation to need a second character or starting over your character to go explore those other trees. And so we're also building a classless system. Well, where as you gain experience in the game, and you'll gain experience through things like combat, and you will also gain experience through crafting and other social mechanics. You'll gain experience through both those methods. And with that experience, you can apply that experience into what I'll broadly call the skill trees. And so for convenience of exploration, we've arranged them into, for example, there's a skill tree being built out for melee combat. There's a skill tree being built out for ranged combat. There's another skill tree being built out for the non-combat professions of, say, mining to refining to crafting of weapons and equipment. There's another one for hunting and gathering and cooking and preparation of food for adventurers. But you can apply your character's growth in whatever one of those you would like to apply them into this week. So for a week I want to study sword play, then I'm a week's level of skill in sword play. If I want to apply that in cooking, I'm a week's skilled in cooking. And that way you can explore the whole game concurrently. But we always try to make sure that we have more skills for you to invest in than you will have skill points to invest. And so we're not going to let everybody become a tank mage across the board. We're going to try to make sure that we meter out levels at a slower pace than we meter into the game skill.
So it's almost time restricted. You couldn't do everything all at once if you're some crazy power gamer per se. It has to be done sort of piecemeal.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, we haven't. The team hasn't really settled on this exactly, but but my proposal du jour would be, if we have a temporary skill cap at 100 levels, the level 50 cap, then we'd want to make sure we had at least 100 skill points for you, or places for you to distribute those skill points, just to make sure that you only could have half of all the things that existed. Mm-hmm. And so over time, you can explore more, and we'll raise the caps, and we'll add as we add in more professions into the game, more skills into the game, we'll continue to raise those caps.
And you guys talked about it back on Tuesday too, but I can't remember. Is taming going to make it in, or did we hit that stretch goal?
We did hit
awesome.
That stretch goal. So taming pets and I think that came in just in this last tier. Come to think of it. Yes,
it's the 1.4.
Yeah.
1.4 million tier is taming. So we already had pets, but they were going to just be things you could purchase. We're now putting in the entire skill tree associated with the non-combat profession of animal taming.
Awesome. Our friend Pocket, I don't know if you know Pocket, she was big on taming in Ultima Online, so that will probably, she'll by now, if she hasn't already given you money, maybe she will now. But okay, well we'll keep going here because we got lots of questions to get through. But let's talk about some of the crafting. So say you come to the online portion, or maybe even the offline. You'll have to tell me whether or not it's possible, and you want to do nothing but make stuff. What will your typical gameplay session involve? Will the process be an active one or passive and mostly UI driven? How does it work? What are the ideas for crafting?
Our intention is that it's fairly active, and we're hoping that it is compelling both in the MMO setting as well as in the solo setting as well. And in fact, let me describe as I keep telling the story of the physical architecture. I think I get a little better and a little more succinct at describing how it works. But what's important to know about how a traditional MMO works and how this game works. In a traditional MMO, your computer is just a dumb terminal, a graphics terminal to the game, which is running on the cloud. And what that means is that for everybody to connect together, first of all, it's got to be a really butch machine in the cloud to handle it. But even then, if you get millions of players, you still can't fit them all onto one server set. So you have to make another instance of the server sets, which is often referred to as a shard, which is a piece of Ultima fiction that has been adopted by all people who make games. And so if your friend creates his character on another shard, you'll never see each other. You cannot see each other. And so it means you have to predict in advance who you want to play with, and hope you don't accidentally connect to different shards of reality. And to make sure we didn't want to get into that problem, and I also wanted, frankly, to be able to play offline when I'm on an airplane or something. So we put the server in everyone's computer. So if I'm offline, I can play on the server that's on my computer. That's part of the client that's on my computer. And then when I get back online, it'll validate that I haven't been cheating, as it both loads what I did and downloads what everybody else has done. But what that also lets us do is we do mini shards on the fly, and that's the new description that I'm trying to teach everybody from the MMO side as to why this really is still an MMO in the way that people expect and want an MMO to be.
Yeah.
We just, every time you change maps, we at that moment shard you at first to everyone you already know, and then their friends, and then some strangers, etc., until we run out of room for us to expose those people to you. It's just that, and that's again one of the advantages of the 2-scale map, is it means you're changing maps, I don't know, every 5 to 30 minutes. And so every 5 to 30 minutes, we do a better job of grouping you with the people that you know for sure, and then friends of friends and friends of friends of friends, etc.
That's cool. That's one thing I wanted to ask about. There are more and more games now that are sort of letting you be inclusive about who you want to play with. You know, like you can be choosy. So are there any systems you guys are thinking about putting in there so you can say, well, I want to play with these kind of players who are interested in this, but I don't want to play with these kind of players? Or is it going to be more like, nope, you have to the luck of the draw kind of thing, besides your friends, of course?
Yeah, and so we hadn't thought in that level of detail, but the system would support that level of detail. So
awesome.
I'll take that as a suggestion. But what we already had set up was what we called a slider to select, do I really want to play by myself only, but online, to where my weapon shop, my great crafting shop that I just put up, everyone can see it, and everyone can see my NPC vendor that's in front of it, and so every person in the world, no matter what shard they're on, so to speak, sees my vendor and can buy and sell and trade from me, so my economics are still gain the advantage of everyone in the world. Even though I don't really want to play anybody, I don't want to see anybody. I don't want anybody to run over and gank me on the head. I just would leave me alone, everybody. I want to play solo. But that also means you can then travel to all the shops that everybody else has made, so the world continues to stay incredibly rich and continuously evolving, even though you're really playing solo player. Then you put the slider to the middle. It says, I really just want to play with my friends. You put the slider all the way to the right. It says, I'm even willing to play with strangers. But as we went into strangers, our default sort was friends, then friends of friends, and that's as far as we went on the friends list. We didn't bother going to friends of friends of friends. We then stepped off into things like people in your same geography, physically in the real world, people who are on similar quest areas, so you might have common cause to work together, people who actually might be on opposing threads of the story, so there'd be a reason for you to have conflict with each other. And so we kind of did our own sort of beyond the friends of friends, so that we would bring people into the game that we thought you would have a high degree of interest in playing with.
That's awesome. I mean, that's sort of the ultimate MMO, really, because you can really ignore people if you wanted to, always.
Right. Right.
Okay. Real quickly, we saw a little bit of it in the video that we have playing in the background. Some of the combat. Can you talk about what sort of direction you're looking at for your combat, or what the team's thinking about? Sort of, is it going to be traditional sort of tab targeting? Is it action based, or is there, are you toying with a lot of different ideas?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, the combat that you see in the video is very primitive.
Prototype.
We have combat operating internally that's far ahead of that. It's just only half baked visually, so it would look terrible to show externally. but it's far enough along I can tell you a lot more about it. And it is neither extreme, which you mentioned. It's neither what you see in the game, which is sort of just action RPG, whack things with your mouse and they're dead after a while. Nor is it tab target. Nor is it you highlight a target and now I go to my shortcut bar and I just min-max my damage over time, and I first start over with my buffs and debuffs, and then I move over to my best DOT items until the opponent's dead. It's neither of those two. What we're doing instead is we're creating something that feels like it has the immediacy of click and attack, but it has the variability and the real-time decision making that comes out of some features we're really taking from deck building games. And the metaphor I use to describe this is, you know how if you look at somebody in the U.S. military, for example, and exactly, you guys have trained for all kinds of combat, right? You train for desert warfare, you train for swamp warfare, you train for all these kinds of warfare. But before we go invade Iraq, we send our troops out on desert combat maneuvers to refresh in their mind desert combat. Or the way I would think about it, when I used to be a tournament fencer at the University of Texas, and the reason why you drill a move over and over and over again is so that hopefully in the real time of battle it will come into your head versus the things that have nothing to do with this battle. So what we're going to do is, even though you already know a bunch of skills, and your weapon even has your weapon actually can be imbued very specifically with additional things that we can refer to today as skills. All those skills you can create ahead of time. Basically think of it as maneuvers ahead of, desert maneuvers before you invade Iraq. You can sit down and go, okay, I hope that during this combat, I think of the parry and riposte and that finishing move that I keep forgetting in every combat. And so you kind of load those into a deck equivalent. And during combat, all these special moves, these bonus moves, keep showing up on screen. And sometimes they can be used in combination. So you can sit there and attack, just click and attack, Or you can go, oh, look, here's that parry and riposte I was looking for. Let me grab that and now attack, and it might be better. Or, oh, look, here's some poison that I know I can apply with this other special move to now do this attack. And so it allows you to, in real time, make decisions that affect the outcome of combat. And it means no two combats will be the same. It'll mean even if you and I are both using similar equipment, our methods will be different. And so we think it is a lot more interesting than a preset shortcut bar that is frankly always pretty much the same in a min-max sense every combat you get into.
Yeah, I like the sounds of it. It's very reactive, and that's kind of the way that the whole industry is going, and it just makes combat more exciting all around. One more for me, then we're going to let Garrett and Robert stop staring at us all. Let's talk about the story this time. Can you go on depth about what the actual story will be about without, I know you don't want to spoil things for players, so like the single-player story, once we get into this world, once we're transported to this world, what happens then?
No, so it's interesting you mentioned the single-player story, because even though you can play completely single-player, including online, because players were really worried about playing online, although I'm hoping I can talk most of them out of it and get them to play at least solo-player online. The story that we're building handles multiplayer very well. I mean, that was one of my biggest disappointments when there are a lot of things I loved about moving from Ultima 1 through 9 to Ultima Online. I mean, tons of things got much better. But one thing that got much worse was story. And in fact, to this day, a number of people have tried to tell story in a multiplayer environment, and it's often not worked. I think we have a good run at it that we're working on right now that lets everyone have a relevant role in the story as it unfolds, even in a multiplayer setting. And so if by the way you're playing solo player, all those roles are filled by NPCs, so it works also in solo player. But the fact that we have a multiplayer story unfolding where people can take on much more unique roles during the unfolding of the story is what I find powerful about the way we're approaching the story. And there's little pieces I can tell you, little pieces you can see in the video, for example, which is when you arrive into the new world, your first job is to figure out what's going on, of course, and you will arrive into a world where the dark forces are on the rise, and these dark forces are not just arbitrary monsters that are mindlessly wandering around to kill people and attack you, for example. These forces are deploying a very specific battle plan, and that battle plan is already becoming apparent to the people that you meet and interact with. In broad strokes, it's because the dark forces on one special night of the week, on the new moon night of the week, those dark forces are coming out at night during the new moon and taking over and conquering one town. And it's not just because they're mean and evil and it's easier to do it in the dark. It's because of a very specific attribute of that night that it gives them something very specific that they're looking for. And so the first mystery for you to unsolve is who are these bad guys? What are they up to? Why are they doing this particular behavior? And what does it mean to me? And that's just the first mystery. But the story unfolds from there, and I think that the people will find it to be a very rich story, very much like Ultimas 4, 5, 6, and 7, which I think we did a particularly good job in storytelling in.
7 was my all-time favorite, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And but I think we have a story here that is at least as powerful, and I think one of the reasons why 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 were particularly good is I had really good writing partners. Warren Spector worked with me for a lot of those Ultimas, and he's a fabulous writer and really helped.
He's available now. You should reach out.
We've actually have we put up a video? We have a video where I'm talking with him that either is up or is coming up.
It came out on Tuesday.
There you go.
Yeah, your interview with Warren was up.
Yeah. So believe me, the subject has been discussed.
Just saying, that'd be awesome. I'd be okay. I would up my pledge, like a certain somebody else in this interview did. That would be Rob down there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Garrett, who's got a few questions for you too. Garrett was a big Ultima Online guy, so I'll just let him go ahead.
Still am a big Ultima Online guy, as Richard and I talked about last week. Anyway, Richard, I know we talked a ton about the game, and we can't go to the end of this interview, Bill, without Richard talking about his PvP philosophy, because what he told me last week is so cool. But we'll get to that in a minute. I wanted to ask you, Rich, about, you've got Ultima had its rune system, which was really fascinating in terms of language and building a language. You had the logo system in Tabula Rasa, which I think was one of the coolest systems ever in a game. You have always had these undercurrents of kind of language and constructing this way for people to communicate. Do you have plans for something like that in Shroud?
Absolutely. And in fact, well, first two pieces. As you probably know, the runes from Ultima were really the same runes that Tolkien used, which are really the same runes you can find if you just look it up in an encyclopedia, or probably now Wikipedia. And so will runes be in the game? First answer, yes. So I'm going to go back again to the same source. If you look at mine versus Tolkien's, they're slightly different. And I'm going to go back to the same source. In fact, I've already got a draft of it on my computer, where the runes will be slightly different, just because I want to make sure I'm not copying the past one for one. But it's close enough that people who are familiar with reading either Tolkien runes or Ultima runes will be able to read and pick up these runes very quickly. And the Logos symbolic language that I put into Tabula Rasa, what's interesting about that is, when I do research for things like language, I have to go do a bunch of study myself. I was never a linguistics expert, and so or virtue expert for that matter. Before I did virtues in games, I'm a big avid reader to go study up. And if you're going to do a pictographic language, things like Egyptian hieroglyphs are a particularly bad choice. Chinese pictographic language is a little better, but it's also kind of mutated over time. But there's some great, wonderful sources. The sources I found that were the best were languages that have been created modernly for communicating with the handicapped. And those were actually very good, but I actually think mine, even for use for communicating with the handicapped, would be better, because a lot of those languages, they try to put in past and present and plurals and things that actually just made it harder to understand. If what you're really trying to do is communication, not accuracy. And so I intend to make another. I'm going to again go back to the same sources, derive a new pictographic language. I think pictographic languages are particularly useful because of the international appeal of games now, because anybody from language can read those. And so yes, and the one that I'm thinking about the hardest, and I don't know if it'll make it in episode 1 or not, is a phonetic language. And you might remember Gargish back in the old days of Ultima 7. We did a language there, but I think I can improve on that considerably. So, but we'll see if we get into this first iteration.
What's the backer goal? I'll pledge it all.
Well, to me in that case it's not a backer goal, because it really just means
time.
These are things that I personally slave over. No one else in the team cares as much as I do, and so it just means I have to do that work. So it's my favorite part of the work to do, and as soon as I have enough time to do it, then it'll show up.
Cool. One of the big things you and I talked about last week was hiring Chris Hickman to do some work with you guys, and it led me to this question. I mentioned it to Bill before. I said, I've never asked Richard about of all the times we've talked, and you have some amazing ideas. You're a huge influence on the industry as a whole. But even now, 2013, what inspires you? What do you look at and go, wow, that's really interesting. I'd love to see that in a game, because we live in a much more visual world than you were building the original Ultima games. And there was not a lot of options. As now you're bombarded with visualization of video games, movies, all that kind of stuff. And in this environment, what do you find inspiring?
That's a excellent question. I get my inspiration in little pieces, really from all over. Strangely, my best plot inspirations usually come from late-night B movies. And I'm not sure why it's always, I guess it's not always B movies, like, Cloth Maps and Moongate came from Time Bandits, literally. And, so there's some from Frontline movies as well. But I enjoy watching late-night, B fantasy and science fiction movies. But what I find when I watch them is, in spite of a lot of their warts that you see in these, that whoever created it usually had some kernel of really strong inspiration that was why they were so passionate they had to go tell the story, and I like extracting that, shall we say, and finding a way to recast it into some of the stories that I tell. So about once a week or once a month, I'll find some great inspiration late at night. I also as a gamer, what's interesting is my gaming inspiration rarely comes from role-playing games. My gaming inspiration, comes from, tower defense games and it's like adventure games or hidden, not exactly hidden options games, but things like it, little puzzle games. And what I get inspired by, though, is tangential. It's not, hey, I want to make one of those. What I get inspired by, I'm still playing Plants vs. Zombies. It's still my favorite iOS game when I'm traveling. And one of the things I love about that, and I love about, say, Kingdom Rush, and I love about, I can think of a few others of the same style, is how well they've managed their economies. Where in the 3 or 4 years I've played Plants vs. Zombies, I still only have the same 300,000 or so coins, and it's been at that same level for 3 years. and it's not because they have that many drains in their economy. It's just because they're good at not escalating the rewards. Later levels and earlier levels give similar rewards, and so that I then take back to MMO design, and I'm going, okay, how can we make sure we don't just have this rampant escalation where, I want to make sure that a level 10 person or monster could be tackled by 10 level 1 guys. And, if anything, it becomes flatter over time versus steeper over time, whereas most role-playing games get steeper to where, by the time you're level 20 or 30, there's no way any number of low-level guys could stand up to you. You could wipe them all out with a single thought. So that's where those are
Psionicysts.
Yeah.
Put that in.
Ideas.
Exactly.
Just give me a credit.
Back of the manual.
Cool. Now I'll let you talk PvP, because the discussion we had last week when you said to Ben and I, one of the things you find really, really important, and you experimented with it in Ultima, is you're probably going to have zones in Shroud where the early zones are very story-friendly, the middle zones are more story-driven PvP, and then the upper zones are kind of a risk versus reward, that if you're daring enough to go out there into a dangerous zone where you could be killed, you will reap the benefits of it. And I think that's a mechanic that works incredibly well in MMOs. And so I'll let you expound on it, because I thought it was so cool when you said that.
By the way, I like the way you said it too. It was nice and succinct.
I had it from my notes. It was very cool.
But no, you're exactly right. On a fundamental basis, I really enjoy as open a world as possible. So our goal is to make it as open and free as possible, and we're including still things that people who are into solo playing and worrying about PvP will find on the surface to be something they will worry about. We're adding in, for example, thief skills and skills, roguish kinds of skills that people are going to go like, oh no, if I'm not interested in that, this is going to make this game something I don't want. But I always tell them, hear me out and even try it before you get too worried if this is the kind of thing that you're worried about. Some of, in my mind, the best moments, the most memorable moments in Ultima Online were the moments where players had other players working at odds to their ends, often in very surprising ways, often when you didn't expect it. On the other hand, some of the worst examples of anything that ever happened in Ultima Online was when you're either a new player or you're just not interested in that sort of thing, and so you're trying to grow tulips in your garden, and somebody comes through with plate armor on and stomps across your home, and it's just not fun. If you're a beginner, it's not fun.
That would be Rob.
If you're a beginner, it's not fun, and if you're truly, what I call a gardener, if you're a nurturer, that's just not fun. And so we want to find a way to make sure that the new players and the gardeners are completely safe and free from abhorrent behavior. On the other hand, as soon as you graduate, or you've said I'm ready to move on, or I know I'm moving into more dangerous areas, as soon as you volunteer to go past that, the game gets progressively more dangerous, and we're going to give you a push. We actually think that in the end, that danger is a thrill for people, and so we've got lots of mechanics in the game that are going to push you across that line as much as you're willing to dare. And so the story regularly does things like seduce you into behavior that will be of great benefit but also put you at jeopardy. And I think the case study I gave to you guys the other day was, there'll be a quest line that says, look, here, if you want to make a bunch of money, I've got a mission for you. But by the way, that mission is carrying contraband from the East Coast to the West Coast. And so, by the way, if you're carrying contraband, you are a target. And not only are you a fair target, we're going to tell everybody about it. The APB bulletin's going to go out that you're traveling across the land. And so other players will get that APB bulletin and say, hey, look, somebody's running contraband here to there. And then people will strategize about where can I catch them when they have to go through a funnel in the mountain range.
Cannonball run.
Yeah, right.
And so that's just a small way. But then, as you noted, Garrett, we also have, the part of our fiction describes why certain parts of the map are particularly rich in economic value for searching and exploration. Part of the storyline also describes why those areas are particularly rich with danger. And so it's completely up to the players if they want to go out there and try to reap those rewards. Even the towns, even the homesteads, however, have that same setup. I think in some of the video we sent over, you can see the place with little dragonflies around. You'll also see one of the towns has this little force field over it. And what that's for is to show that that particular town actually has a level of protection that is offered. And so these once every new moon night where the forces of evil come around and start tromping on people, that town is on a relative scale safe compared to those that do not have those kinds of shield capabilities.
Good to know.
Yeah. And there's a day, you mentioned very quickly, the day-night cycle where the night is considerably more dangerous than the day, which I thought was really cool too.
Yeah, and in fact, not just day-night, but the presence of light. And so, for example, on the roads that connect cities, we're thinking of putting, lighting effects or lampposts, you might call them, all the way along those roadways, so that if you leave the town at night, it's inherently more dangerous. But if you stay on the road at night, it's less dangerous than if you get off-road. And so getting off-road, of course, is very dangerous. And in fact, so that means that, monsters or bad guys might come along and, hack down, cut off those lampposts so that you'll be going along the yellow brick road and suddenly it gets dark. And you're going, oh, now what do I do? Do I turn back? Or do I continue in and try to turn on that lamp that I can see, down there a mile ahead, that if I can get it back on, it's safer for me and my friends?
Yeah, I thought it was cool. So I'll turn it over to Rob. I love the ideas, though.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Thanks for the intro, Garrett. You kind of answered this question earlier when we talked about the social media, and I think last time on Tuesday I might have kind of overstated slightly the importance of social media to the game. But you did talk about the fact that people will still be able to play with strangers if they want to. That will be
absolutely.
An option.
Well, in fact, let me specifically say what social media means to this game. First of all, this is a digitally downloaded PC game for hardcore gamers. If you have never heard of social media, you're going to do just fine in this game. It does not need to have any association whatsoever with social media. That being said, I am a big believer in the power of a friends graph. And because I think that, if when I'm walking around on the streets of New York, for example, the 10,000 other people that are headed to their other thing to do might as well be NPCs to me. I mean, unless it's a person who I'm going to see not just once, but have some excuse to see 2 or 3 or 4 times, or are somebody I already know, there's just really no point in them being in my world, my shard, so to speak. Might as well be an NPC. Although I don't mind them in my shard, it's just that, once you've filled up a shard with enough, the rest can be somewhere else. I don't care.
Okay.
And so what we're doing with social media is we're saying, look, if you will give us access to your friends graph either through Facebook or through LinkedIn or through Google+, or through your email contact list, or once you're in the game, just type them in for us, tell us the names of your friends. If you'll just tell us who your friends are, we can leverage that to make sure that the people who you actually know and actually care about are the people who we shard into your existence first.
Very cool.
And so that's really what it's for. That's the connection to social media. That's the power that I think was learned. And even though most of your viewers won't want to go play, or maybe a few did, but most probably are not big Farmville fans. There are some great lessons in there about how to leverage a friends graph and go. You know what? Even if 2 of your real friends are not playing online at the exact same time, you still want to know what happened on their farm or their blacksmith shop, and you still want to be able to go visit it. You still want to have some impact on it, buy from their vendor, sell to the vendor, whatever it is. And so there's great lessons from social media that we're trying to pull into the world of MMOs.
Surprisingly enough, actually, after our interview on Tuesday, I had a number of people reach out to me, and they were concerned that they wouldn't be able to meet new people in the game if they supplied you with all this social media, and that they would only play with their friends or their friends' friends, and they wouldn't have the opportunity to run into somebody new, and especially for like the people that really dig like the RP community, where they not just play the game, but they want to play out the game.
Well, what's interesting about that is, think about a friends graph. One of our guys here, Dallas, does a lot of research on a person's tribe. The 50 to 150 people who you know by name and occasionally go to dinner with and occasionally go to the movies with. Those are your tribe. And in most social media, 50 to 150 friends is what most people have nominally. Well, of those 50 to 150 people, only some fraction of those people are going to be gamers. We'll take it down to 50 as a case study here. Well, of those 50, only a certain number of them are going to be playing the same game you are. We'll take it down to 20. Of those 20, how many of them are going to be online at the same time as you, regularly? And the answer goes down to like 1 to 5. And probabilistically, at any time you log on, the answer is going to be 0. And so in fact, it would be a mighty lonely world if the only people we exposed to you were your actual friends in the game. You would generally see no one. And so that's why we not only go from friends to friends of friends, because those people you at least have some common interest with. Go, hey, how do I know you? Oh, you know Bob, I know Bob. Okay, well then we're going to go. But we even then go beyond that to all these other levels of sorting. So it will feel like an MMO. It will feel as full and rich as a shard of any other MMO. It's just that we are favoring people who you will likely care about versus isolating a lot of those people on another shard that you'll never see ever again. We're doing the opposite. We're trying to force together people who know each other.
And last one to follow up on that with social media, we'll move on. But will there be any kind of tie-in to where in-game I could, instead of having to get out of game or Alt-Tab or go to my tweet deck or whatever, I could /tweet, hey, it's Rob, I'm in Shroud of the Avatar, come join me, # SOTA.
Very interesting.
That is
and leverage social media that way.
That is a great suggestion. If you're seeing me take my eyes off the screen to
He's
make
writing
notes.
But
What a yeah.
I would love to say that I came up with it, but I've seen it at least twice now. No, well, Sony
Rift
does it too.
Sony does do it, but I think Rift was the first one I remember like linking right into Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah,
there's no reason not to. So and really we want to. We want to create tools that enable people to deepen their relationships with the people they already know they want to have a relationship with. I mean, there's only so many new people you can meet on a day and bring into your tribe of close friends. By definition, once you get to 150, for every one that comes in, you're probably pushing one out, whether you like it or not, just because you don't have enough contact to maintain that relationship. So what we really want to do is help you deepen the relationships with people you've already indicated that you want to have a relationship with. And that can be new people, by all means. If somebody comes up to your store and you strike a conversation about the great storage you've been building them, and they're going like, wow, you're a cool dude, let's go on an adventure together. We will, by the way, when you adventure with somebody, we will remember that. And so we will begin to build a friends graph of our own just based upon your behavior in the game. Because we want you to meet somebody more than once. Anybody you have a conversation with, we assume, well, you've now at least given us one tick on the reason to bring that person back into your shard again, because you at least might recognize you've met him before.
Awesome. So, okay, we'll take the social media. We'll set it aside for now. I think we've kind of talked about that one enough. But let's get back to the story, and let's talk about Tracy Hickman for a second.
Yeah,
Tracy, go ahead.
I was going to say the 1.8 million, I believe, is the stretch goal to hit to actually get the book he's going to write as an ebook for free to all the backers. But even if that's not achieved, and let's hope we are, because actually, since we've been here, you've broke the 1.4. You're actually like 1.402 on Kickstarter with about another 45 on your website. So we've collected quite a bit since we've been on.
Time we cross $100,000, we all take a shot of whiskey here. So I need to yell out.
I need to get some.
Get some whiskey because it's time. Will we see that as like a hardback book or trade paperback, or how will we see that if we don't get it digitally as a backer reward?
Yeah, so we're talking about that now. We literally had Tracy on a chat with us just before I came to talk to you guys, and one of the things we were trying to figure out is exactly the answer to that question. I'm hopeful we get the 1.8 right here through Kickstarter. But by the way, if we don't, we have that Shroud of the Avatar independent site, and we'll do something as similar to those stretch goals offline, just to keep people engaged and try to bring in more money to do more development. And so we'll still keep pushing for things that we didn't get through Kickstarter, post-Kickstarter. But let's still suppose, for some reason, we didn't get to that anytime soon. We all of us want to see that done. And so this is really just an idea that's been kicked around literally today by the team, which is say, maybe we'll put up a separate Kickstarter just for the book, just to say, hey, look, well, if we all pitch in $5 or something, we can go ahead and have enough people committed to just produce the book in hardbound or digital and get it made and distribute it to everybody. So we if need be, we're going to find a way. Is the point? We're going to figure out a way to make sure we reach that, because so far that's been a pretty universal opinion. Is everybody's going like, hey, we need to find a way to get that done.
I have a Kindle app that's just waiting for it.
See, me and you, Bill, we need to have a talk seriously about your choice on how to read books. Books are on paper, and they're bound. They have a hard case. You put them on a shelf, and they stay there. They don't go on Kindles.
They do. They go on iPads.
You can read anything else you want on your
iPads.
little, you read blogs, you read social media, you don't read books on...
That is a very interesting debate, because, I never really thought where I sit on that debate, but I have to tell you, I read everything that is not a book. I read on my iPhone or iPad. But as soon as it comes to anything that's fictional novelization book, I read it in physical form. That's a very interesting supposition.
I could go on a rant
right now.
I could go on a total rant about it.
He's like, Rob said earlier he listened to books on Audible. Any book I listen on Audible, I actually own a hard copy of as well. So
I have books everywhere in my house, but I can have like 1,000 or more on my iPad, and I'm okay with that.
Interesting debate.
Off the books, Mr. Hickman, and on to a little bit more technical of a topic. We talked Tuesday about the hex map system. I did a little more reading, and it looked like you had some tools to help you guys easily design kind of like play sets to go with that hex map. And will this allow the developers to change like pre-existing content that's already on the map to meet different events or different change of seasons maybe?
Exactly. You understand it precisely, because it will let us do all kinds of things much more easily and fluidly than we could if it was a monoscale map. For example, I'm still pitching. The very first city that was ever built in Ultima Online was called Pax Lair, and it was a completely player-built city. It's still run to this day. It's run phenomenally well. I just love it. And one of the things I really want to see that group of people do is come rebuild a new Pax Lair in the new game. But if they decide they want to do that, if we had a monoscale map, it means we'd have to reserve a big chunk of the area for them and create a set of tools for them to really do it well. And I mean, there'd be it would require what I'll call a certain group of technologies. On the other hand, if the way we want to do it now, if we want to invent a new town, Pax Lair, we just drop one icon. And it's literally as easy as change that tile, and now it invokes a whole other subsection of map that is unique as opposed to generic underneath it. And so it also means that if, for example, during an expansion we say a dark wizard has risen to power, we don't have to. If we had to build that in secret while the players are watching in the real physical world, it'd be really hard to manage. On the other hand, since it's in a shard of its own, so to speak, we build the entire tower offline in that shard, and then when we're ready to deploy it, we drop the tower into the map, that point of interest into the map. And so we can do that with islands, we can do it with cities, we can do it with dungeons, we can change the interconnectivity of the world, kind of what I'll call in private offline, and then change just one or two things in the live world, just like players can change one or two things in the live world and make sweeping changes to the total play experience.
That's awesome.
Okay, and another one that I wanted to ask about, go into single-player mode. Let's say that I've got my avatar, and I've primarily been playing, I guess I would assume I can pretty much play my entire story online in multiplayer mode if I want to.
Yep.
Now, let's say for whatever reason I can't get online, but I still want to play. I'm in an airplane, and I'm on my laptop, and I don't have Wi-Fi. All right, so I'm on single-player mode, and I'm using that same avatar.
Yep.
Can I pop him back into online mode? And
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And so my general assumption is that everybody would play online and just move that slider between how many friends of strangers do I want to see versus how close to only friends do I want to be. I think most people will play in the fully open way because I think it'll be less threatening than most people think it's going to be. But since it's easy for us to dial back, we put in all those dial backs. But and we even allow people to play permanently offline. But if you play permanently offline, we assume that you're going to hack your computer and hack your player. And if you want to do that, that's fine. But that means that once you've started down that path, we won't let you take a player you started in offline mode and ever take it back online. Just because of the hacking problems. There's no way we can validate that much change.
And that's where my concern was. So I can start multiplayer, go offline mode, and bring him back, but I just can't start single player or offline.
You can't start offline. Yeah, and that has to do with the way that we're doing the validation. And you know, this is an oversimplistic statement about validation. But while you are playing offline, you are always generating value, right? We know that for every hour you play, you're earning about an hour's worth of experience points, we'll call it. So an hour of play, hour of experience points. But what we'll do is we'll squirrel away some fraction of those experience points always. So you'll never know about the other half that we're accumulating on your behalf. And so whenever you step offline, we have a pool of things we know that you really have earned through online play that we'll begin to bring back to you and let you kind of dip into that pool. And that way you can't cheat. You can't go, now I've got 1 billion experience points, I log back on and I'm 10 times stronger than I was. And so, and there's certain things that there are at least a few examples of things that have to be validated online for you to do. For example, buying a piece of property in the game. You really can't do that offline because 2 people can't buy the same piece of property. And so, because that's the one thing that is truly unique and persistent about the world is property. And so while you're offline, you can decorate your house all you want because what everybody else is seeing is the previous state of your house. And when you come back online, it updates to the server what changes you made about your house. And so any new person who's going into a new shard will see your updated house. And similarly, once you get back online, you'll see all the changes everybody else made into their houses or shops or whatever else, or even the control points in the tabula rasa sense. All those things will update when you come back online. So, so you're sort of playing in a static version of the persistent world while you're offline, and the changes you can make to the static parts of the persistent world are limited while you're offline, but you can still go on your missions, you can still advance your quests, you can still be gaining experience points, you can still be doing all those sort of things for at least a substantial period of time, approximately equivalent to how much time you've ever played online, and after which point in time we'll know you're going into what I'll call deficit, and we know that, by the way, there's some risk that you're cheating, and so, and by doing it this way, even if you write a little macro that says, hey, I'm going to cheat and give myself my reserved value, so what? You know, it's not that big a cheat in our mind. We'll try to prevent it by all means, but if anybody finds a way to hack it, it's not the end of the world.
But you won't be able to see. I'm sorry to dovetail on top of you, Rob, but like, so what about items and things like that maybe they earned while they were offline and bringing back on? Do you have a way to validate those as well?
Yeah, exactly. So that's all fine. So anything, literally the only thing that we can, so far I've discovered that you really won't be able to do when you're offline is sweeping persistent changes for the world, like buying a new piece of property. But redecorating is fine because it's your piece of property. Other people just don't see those changes until you get back on. Awesome. And you won't see their changes until you get back on. We just have to prevent the conflict. And so, for example, the reason why that works for a house but doesn't work for lots is because of the conflict. You're the only one that can change the things in your house. Strangers, even that you let come see your house, can't steal your chairs and take them to their house. You are allowed to change your house. They're allowed to change their own house. And so any changes you make are by definition the master changes. And so it'll propagate to everybody else when they get online. It's only when 2 people in theory could compete for the exact same persistent resource, like a lot, that we have to do that online.
Cool.
Then my last question was about the fact that you guys went ahead and introduced some new tiers today. You upped the rewards, like the $120 virtual. You can get all 5 episodes now, and not just the first 3. Actually, I think it's even a new tier that might have been created.
Exactly, the Digital Explorer And we did that because we had it a little higher, $125. We had a physical goods version of the Explorer. But for a lot of people who live overseas, they don't want to bother with import problems. They really want that full experience. They want to participate, and they're happy to pay for all 5 episodes in advance. But they just need it digitally, just because they're you know, they don't want the hassle of physical goods overseas. And so that's really what that digital version was set up for, was to accommodate those people.
I'm just waiting for a boat. I like the seas.
Yeah.
I want to be a pirate.
So, by the way, we're still working on boats. It's funny. Boats came up the other day. Everyone on this team loves the ideas of boats. We're just trying to figure out how to work it in. And the only reason we didn't add it into to the system so far is because we actually were worried that if we added boats into what I'll call the middle, that boats are cool enough, we might actually have people dump their higher level tiers they're currently in, because boats are so cool we'd drag them down. And if we put boats all the way at the top of the tiers, most people won't get them, and so they'll be sad because they won't be available.
Boats for everybody.
Make them an add-on.
There you go.
That's exactly. But you can't do add-ons in Kickstarter, and so that is likely exactly what we're going to see, is have them as an add-on. But that'll probably show up on the Shroud of the Avatar site, and probably after the close of Kickstarter. But literally, we're wrestling with it every day as to exactly how to do that. But we think it's a brilliant suggestion that one of the other players gave us the other day.
Cool. Anything else from anybody, real quick?
Good.
Good. I have one little thing. You might have already talked about it a lot. I apologize if you have. One of the best things, and I think people forget that Ultima 7 did, is it added sort of NPC schedules. You know, they went to bed, they went home, and you could break into their house and kill them and steal their knapsack and run away and everything like that. Is that sort of interaction? You know, you have the day and night cycle. Is that going to be part of the game too with NPCs? Do they have lives?
Absolutely true.
Yay. Excellent.
So yes, and in fact, if I can throw out one here too, by the way, which is something else you may have noticed about the new tier rewards is. And we've had it on our live cam that we've got going. Is I'm a pack rat. I have kept every slip of paper. You know, just sitting here beside me. I have all the mail and stuff I've received through the years. Even back in my D&D campaigns, I have all the little drawings and sketches that people made about their characters. I still have it all sitting right here beside me. And so I also have, you know, when I made the very first Acalabeths, before I ever had a publisher, I handmade them on my Apple II that's just down the hall. And I made them as they were needed to hang on the pegboard of the Computerland store that I was working at and selling them at before a publisher picked it up. And I would assemble those packages 1 or 2 at a time and hang them on the wall. But the materials I had to have printed in bulk. And so I have a box, an old Apple II. It was actually the box that the floppy disk came in, floppy drive. And I have that box with all those materials. I still have the cassette tape labels and the disc labels and the blank discs, or actually recorded on discs. And the little blue Xerox cards that my mother drew for me as the cover arts, and the hand-stapled little manuals. I have all those parts and pieces.
You're not going to be on a celebrity edition of Hoarders Buried Alive,
I was just going to say, I'm like...
So I have specifically have these parts and pieces in a box.
Oh, that's awesome.
And but I didn't know exactly how many I had, but we thought, oh, let's for people who come in at that $10,000 tier, you know, it's hard to justify, you know, financially. Why, what we can give people at who's contributing at $10,000. I mean, they're obviously doing it as a very kind, generous, investment in our ability to pull this off. And so I was going like, what can I give as a personal thank you? And so I went back to that box, and I had, just what I'll call a handful. I knew it was more than 10. I had a handful of these original Acalabeths, of which only 10 or so were sold originally, and only 2 others of my own collection have ever been given out in the past in intervening years. And so there's really only like a dozen in the real world outside of this box. And so we put up originally 10 of them at that highest level of Lord of the Manor of these, but now have sold out. And so I then went back, but I went back to the box and I said, okay, well, let me actually count them. And I actually assembled them literally yesterday. I said, well, versus just guess, let me actually reassemble them and see how many I actually have. And so the answer is I actually have just over 20. And so I have like 24 total. So we just added 10 more into the game. And that'll leave me with my own personal collection. We'll be down to 4 or so.
And I think you've sold 2 of those already, by the way.
There you go.
All right. So in any case, now we have 10 more Lord of the Manor, Calabeths to give out.
And Rob has just upped his pledge to $10,000.
Right there, my wife might get a little upset about that.
The kids aren't going to college. Sorry.
College, a Ziploc bag, college, a Ziploc bag. Yeah.
I'm not sure which one's more valuable anymore, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't get a college degree. It didn't seem to hurt me none.
See, exactly. Yeah, I have too many, and I'm not anywhere where you're at. Well, anyway, I want to thank you, Richard, for stopping by with us twice this week. I know that the Kickstarter ends in just 3 days now, just under 3 days. Well, I guess what the next step is once it's all over, can we talk again and talk about what goes on now?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, this is sort of a new age, a new era. Not only are we getting people to participate with us right here in the moment of its public inception, shall we say, but it's really important that we keep people as part of this process all the way through. Even the whole thing we just went to the last thing we just talked about, boats, ships, that would have never come up had we been sitting in here by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And on the same front, housing, by the way, we added in a whole bunch of unique housing that also would never have come up. It's actually easy for us to pull off. Would have never thought of it if we weren't engaged in a public discourse like this. And so absolutely, as often as you guys would like, as much as your audience will tolerate, please have us back, have me back, your other team members if you like as well. It's very important to us to be well connected to the players, because that's exactly, we're making this game for them.
That's who it's all about. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think.
Real quick, Bill, just on that note, Richard, thanks so much for sharing prototype gameplay. I don't think any developer I've ever worked with in the last 8 years has actually let the public see prototype gameplay. I think it's awesome. You guys just let it out.
I think you have to if you're going to be like, asking for money, you better show something. Yeah.
But yeah, and that's why we try to do a blend of get some concept sketches up there so they know really where it's headed, so that the critics who immediately go, that game looks like crap. You go, yeah, we know. That's because we found those assets online. Here's what it's really going to look like.
I'm not going to lie, when I first found it, I'm like, oh, I don't know, it looks a little dated, and then I'm like, oh, prototype. Okay.
I remind people that in the article. I'm like, it's prototype. It's prototype.
Even our videos, we had like the video we posted on the site, they're like, I don't know, I'm not about eye candy, but I don't know if I could play some. I'm like, it's prototype, just wait.
Well, in fact, Chris Spears, our lead technologist, has now taken to de-resing images. Since the word prototype doesn't seem to be enough to let people know that, he's literally putting a pixelization filter on a lot of the stuff he's putting out when he's asking questions about UI or other stuff, to say, don't pay attention to the back graphics behind it. I'm asking you this very specific question. Pay no attention to the graphics.
Blurring it out like it's a rated X movie.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, thank you for stopping by. I know you've been going kind of like 24/7 since the Kickstarter began. I wish you all the best of luck over the next few days. Keep us posted, and maybe next week we'll have you on again, or we'll sit down, we'll do something, and see what goes on for Shroud of the Avatar next.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Everybody who's watching, don't forget to go over there and pledge if you haven't already. It's at shroudoftheavatar.com, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can also find it on Kickstarter. Just look it up over there. And follow us on twitch.tv at MMORPG.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and everything else at MMORPG.com. I'm Bill Murphy. Right below me, it's Garrett Fuller. Say hi, Garrett. Bye, Garrett.
Hey, guys. Have a great night.
Rob Lashley all the way at the bottom, as always. You guys know him.
Stand by.
And, of course, the inimitable Richard Garriott.
Pleasure. Good night.
Have a good one, guys.